Here we go. Ceterum, but ubi, when, compositos, accusative plural for basically composed or all together in an order. Firmis ordinibus, sequi rosus videre. So videre is they saw, rosus again, sequi being followed. By firmis ordinus, these are arranged lines basically. So they're seeing them in fugem versi, versi again plural, so they turned into flight. So they again saw themselves being followed by very firm or orderly or strong rows. They fled, non-ag minibus, not in ag mines, not in columns or in a very strict military lines. Ut prius, as before, as prior. Nec alios alium respectantes. This is a present participle plural, taking on a substantive noun sort of looking thing. So neither was alias, was one person respectanting, not were they looking out for one another. Actually, you could probably just treat it as a present participle. Neither was one of these respecting people. One of these, they weren't having respect one for another, you might want to say. It comes from present participle. A rare means they were dispersed out, they were in a thick group. E vita bunde, they were avoiding each other. In vicem in turn, longinqua atqui avia petire. This is a perfect, again, they were seeking a via. A via is a road. A via means an unroaded places, so hard to travel sometimes, and longinqua probably means far away. So they were spread out, rarei, and avoiding each other in turn, seeking something far away and off the road, off the beaten track. Finis sequendi nox en satietas fuit. So night and satiety of bloodshed made a finis, an end of the following sequendi. And we'll have a daily dictionary word. Vita bundus. The bundus is a adjective ending, shunning, avoiding, evading. Veto comes from avoiding. And I'll show you this other website, which is called Morpho. And if you put in your keyword at the top, it'll put all these different pars down here. And it's got its frequencies. As peto is the 131st word. Collocations here, even though peto's listed 160. It's got instances here, petiste, petierunt. So we saw peteri, that's the shortened form of petierunt. Perfect active indicative. So you can check out that site if you want. Back to the daily dictionary word, vitabundus. Okay. Caesar hostium ad decem millia. So the slaughtering of the enemy was to 10,000 ad decem millia. Nostrorum of ours, 300 sexaginta and 60 cacidere fell. So in the slaughter of the enemy there was 10,000, but of us 360 fell. Qui, in quiz, in who, in which, Aulus Atticus, the praefectus cohort, a prefect of a cohort, these three are in that position, Aulus Atticus, Juveni ardor, these adjectives take I in the ablative, so with the ardor of youth, or with the youthful ardor, juvenile is the adjective for youth, and the ferocity, the ferocia equi, and the ferocity of your horse, in latus, again, this is a past passive, going with this nominative form of Aulus Atticus. He was in latus to the hostibus. So the ferocity of his horse and his youthful ardour brought him in towards the enemy, into the enemy. 38. Et nox quidem gaudio praeda qui lata victoribus. And night, et nox, quidem, indeed or even, and not even, gaudio, comes from gaudium the neuter, so it was with joy. Praeda qui, so the enclitic qui means and booty and happiness to the victors. Later is adjective for happiness. So there was a happy booty to the victors, so they were happy with their booty. Britanni, this was the Britons in nominative plural. Palantes, this would be going with it in that position. Of course, the plural accusative and nominative are the same, but we would say that this is nominative. So the straggling Britons, the Palantes, these are stragglers basically, or wandering about Britons. Mixto virorum muliorumque ploratu. So mixto ploratu is with mixed in weeping. That's where you get implore and other English words. With a mixture of weeping of the men and the women, vivorum and the mulias of the women. We've got an infinitive, trahe, to drag, vulneratos, the wounded, vocare, to call the integros, these are the people who are whole, so contrasting the wounded and the whole. Desere their domoses, to desert their houses, or leave the houses. Ac per iram, and through anger. Ultro, is this of, or beyond this, or of their own accord. Incendere, okay, so they deserted their homes, and through anger, on their own part, they incendiated their homes, they burnt them as well. To eligere latabras, this is to choose hiding places, or hidden away places. Et statim relinquere, and immediately statim, to relinquish. So they choose places and then immediately leave, semicolon. Miscere in visem, so to mix in turn, concilia aliqui. Concilia's got an S, so they would have some councils together, deinde, with a, what do you call the letters of the alphabet? You've got vowels and the other one, consonant. See, if it's got a consonant, it doesn't have the E bit there. So then they would separate, so they would in turn come together for some council and then separate, separe. Aliquando, so sometimes, frangi aspectu pignorum suum. So at the aspect, or at the site of their pignorum suum, a pignorum can be used for pledges, but it's also used for your loved ones. Frangi, so they would become broken at the sight of their loved ones. And sapius is comparative, so rather often or more often, concitare, they were excited. Satisqui constabat. Constabat's one of those impersonals. So it was understood, it's agreed, constabat means. Satisfactorily, satis is the adverb. So it's satisfactorily agreed. Savisse quosdem, which comes from the demonstrative pronoun. Certain of them, savage in cognaxes, towards their spouses. So certain of them are very savage towards their spouses, ac libros, and children. Tamquam miserentor. Tamquam just means just as if or like. Miserentor, which comes from the word for misery and pity, etc. So as if it was from pity's sake, they attack their own spouses and children. That's satisfactorily agreed. Do a bit of scrolling. Proximus dies, which means next day. Don't be thinking that it's a plural. Dies is the fifth. It just means the next day. The faciam, which is the accusative. Victoria, genitive. So the appearance of victory. Latius appeared. So it was open to them. On the next day, the appearance of victory. Latius, rather widely. It's another comparative. Vastum ubique silentium. So ubique is an adverb, means everywhere. Vastum silentium, there was a vast silence, a huge silence, everywhere was silent. Secretae coles, these literally means the hills were separated. So I'm guessing it's meaning there was no one there. Fumantia procol tecta. Tecta means roof, but it means house. So procol means far off. There's fumantia would be the smoking tecta, smoking houses, because we saw earlier they set them on fire. Nemo means no one in the nominative. Exploratibus, obvious. Obvious means went out to meet. So for the explorer buses, they're the scouts. So no one met their scouts. Scouts didn't meet anyone. Obvious taking the dative. Quibus in omnem partem dismissus. So the quibus dismissus is a ablative absolute. So with these people dismissed, sent out, these are scouts, these explorers, into all parts. Ubi, where, incerta fuga vestia, where the uncertain vestiges or footprints, fuga of flight, nequi usquam conglobri hostis compertit. And nequi means in neither, usquam was anywhere, compertum was found, the hostis, the enemy, to be congloberating, which means coming together in a group. So he sent out his men into all parts where there was uncertain tracks of these flights, and neither anywhere where they found that they were coming together. And in brackets, et exacta iam estate spage bellum nequibat, which is an imperfect. And with exacta estate, with summer having exacted out, with summer having been completed. And we have the S there in that, so we know it's summer. Yam already. Nequibat. He was not able to sparge the bellum. He's not able to extend or sprinkle out, literally more war. So summer was now gone through and he wasn't able to continue on with the war. In Finis Borestorum, into the lands of the Boresti, which is the possibly at the mouth of the river Spey, he deducated his exorcism. So he led his army into these lands of these people. Ibi there acceptus obsidibus, however you want to say, having accepted hostages or with hostages received is an ablative. Prefecto classes circumvihi Britanniam precepit. So he gave instructions. He gave these precepts to dative the prefect classes of his fleet to circumvihi Britain, to circumvihate, to go around Britain. What do you call it? Circumnavigate, possibly. Ipsi himself, peditum atqui equites, these are the cavalry and the foot soldiers, lento itinere, so himself with a lento itinere means a slow march, literally, a slow journey, and the peditum and equites are in the accusative. Quo, to where novarum gentium of new races, animae ipsa transitus mora terrentor. So which this mora, this delay, would a terrentor, would be a terror into the anima, which is the minds of the new races, ipsa transitus. So himself, he did this transition, he did this crossing with a slow marches so that this delay or lingering would terrify the new races, and in hibernus locovited. So he camped, Lokovich is the word for placing a camp, in winter quarters, hibernus. Et simul, and at the same time, classes the fleet, secunda tempestate ac fama, with a favourable, again ablative, favourable weather and reports, or the rumours of them, they tenuated, they held Truculensem portem, which is an apposition, the Truculensem port, or what's that in English? Truculum, the Truculum port, or you might want to put an of in English, the port of Truculum. Unde, from where Proximo Britannia we've got a difference in the text. I think one is the e-text. Litore, I think we've got. Litore. Oh, there we go. From where omni, they all. I think there's a change there. That's also omnis as well. Different text. From where Rediat, they returned. So they held this port from where they had returned. From Proximo Littorio, from the nearby shores of Brittany. So they'd gone along the shores of Britain and they all returned here. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so the ablative absolute section was Proximo Littorio Praelecto. Praelego is to sail by or to skirt. Hunc rerum cursum, this course of events, basically is what it's saying, quam, although nulla verborum, that's the genitive, jactantia is a boasting, epistulus agricola auctum. So, although with no boasting of words, nulla jactantia of words, this increased epistulus agricola. These are in the letters of Agricola. Although he didn't use any boasting words, there was an increase, probably his reputation, ut erat dominitio mores, as were the mores, the habits basically, to domination. Fronte latus, so with a happy front, with a happy face basically, but pectora anxious accepted. So he received this, these epistles, these letters, and this good news, anxious in his pectora, in his chest or in his heart. But as was his custom, he put on a happy face, but he was a bit worried because that's the kind of person he was. In erat, so in it, conscienta, so there was in his conscience, derisu fuisi, there had been this derision or mocking Nuper forsum his recent falsum triumphum. So falsum triumphant, this false triumph from the Germans, from Germania. So there was in his consciousness that had been derided recently from a false triumph over the Germans, which had been the Chatai. Emptis per commercia. Emptis means having been bought through commerce, so he'd spent money. Quorum of those which habitus and crinus, this is the habitus, usually mean clothing, I think, and crinus is the hair, in captivorum speciem formorenta. Okay, so speciem is, so which had the appearance, the speciem, formorenta means basically the same in English. So it formed or made the appearance of their clothing and their hair to be in captivorum, in the appearance of captives. So he just bought people of who had a similar sort of way he could form to make their hair and their clothing look like he had taken captives. At nunc, but now, a verem magnum qui, a true and great victorium, a true and great victory. Tot millibus hostium cases, so many thousands cases slain hostium of enemies, genitive, ingentia fama celebrare, and with a huge fame, huge increase of fame, because we saw octum up here, going to Agricola, to be celebrated, celebrare, that would be the passive infinitive. Id, this, in the neuter form, sibi, to him, maxime formidulosum, is his adjective form. There was this great dread to him, formidulosum, it's a dread. Pravate hominis nomen, so nomen is the name, double genitive, of a private hominis, of a private man, private citizen, would be a tolide, to be lifted up supra principum, above the leader. The princeps would be the emperor. Frustra, in vain, studia fore. This has been his zeal of the forum, basically his studies of the forum, forums where they had law courts and markets. So this would be, so his studies of basically law and speaking as a lawyer, and civilium artem decus. Decus is the honour of these civil arts. Acta, just means it's like factor, basically. They've been acted out or done in solentium. So all these studies of public speaking and his honours and the civil ways were now in the silence. See if militarem gloriam alias occuput. So C would be if, alias another, occuparet would be occupy or have. This militarem gloriam, military glory. Cetera, the rest, utcumque, so whenever the rest, facilius, were rather easily, it's a comparative, dissimulare, to make pretenses of the rest whenever it was easy. Ducus boni imperatorium virtutem esse. The virtues of valour of a good leader, a ducus boni esse, they were imperial, basically, so he could dismiss the rest of the things which happened easily, but these good qualities of a good leader, he saw them as a threat to himself, basically. Talibus curis exercitus. I think this would be the past passive. So he was excited, you might say, or he was motivated by talus curis, such cares or anxieties, quodqui, in which save cognitatis indicium erat, and these indications of his savage cogitations, I might say quads, because he had these savage or violent thoughts. Secreto sue satiatus. Satiatus means he's satiated or full of secreto, and full with his secrets. So he was filled up with his own secrets. He was exercising all these cares. He was thinking some savage thoughts. Optimum in presentia statuit. Statuit means he decided it was optimum, was best in presentia, in the present circumstance or the present time. Reponere odium, to place down his odium, to set aside his hatred. Donec, until impetus fame et favor exercitus, until the impetus, or that's probably impetus in English, the impetus of fame and favour of the army, exercitus here is different than that, exercitus. This is a fourth declension, so it's a genitive. Until the impetus or the force of the favour and fame of the army had languescated, which I think languesco was one of the daily dictionaries last week. Just means it calmed down. Nem etiam tum Agricola Britannian obtimavit. For even then, Agricola had obtained or gotten hold of Britain. Is that the way we're going to end?